Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. Well, happy Tuesday there, folks. Brian Nichols here on the Brian Nichols Show. Get ready because we're taking a 90-degree turn, but before we get there, want to go ahead and first thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, and today we have a great guest in store for you. But first, let's go ahead and give a shout out to today's sponsor, and that is the Expat Money Show. Head over to briannicholsshow.com/expat, where you can go ahead and not only check out the Expat Money Summit, which is going to be taking place November 7th through November 11th. But in the meantime, make sure you go ahead and check out the Expat Money podcast, because why? You want to protect the money you work so hard to earn from the ambulance-chasing lawyers, nefarious creditors, and greedy, unjust governments. Please go ahead and join our good buddy, Mikkel Thorpe, because he says, I help people just like you to invest internationally, secure second passports and residencies, eliminate your tax bill, and take advantage of offshore structures so you can travel the world freely and never have to worry about money again. One more time, briannicholsshow.com/expat. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for the Expat Money Summit the Money Summit. There we go. Taking place November 7th through November 11th. It is a virtual summit, 50 speakers, 5 days. And I promise you, if you watch for a week, it will leave you lasting all the benefits for a lifetime. So, folks, with that being said, on to today's episode. We have a great guest in store for you. He just wrote a brand new book, and it's taking a brand new approach to the way we deal with the federal government. Fred Eberlein, he's joining us to talk about the 90-degree turn. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show.
Thank you, Brian. Pleasure to be here.
Fred, absolutely excited to have you on the program, and definitely looking forward to having this conversation to dig deep into this 90-degree turn that you've presented here to the audience in your new book. But before we get there, please do us a favor. Introduce yourself to the Brian Nichols Show audience and your world into where you're taking such a sharp 90-degree turn.
Okay, well, I'm kind of semi-retired now. Or I should say I am semi-retired. It was 40 years in tech. That's where the story in the book actually starts. When I first go to grad school at American University, and that was at 75, a few years ago. But anyway, 40 years in tech. I live in Europe currently. I'm American. I was born in New York. And I observed and sold to the federal government for some years, both in the US and Washington. I covered the Pentagon, and in Europe. And it bothered me to see the degree of inefficiency. It's always stayed with me. As I mentioned in the book, I had somewhat of an epiphany a number of years ago after reading Startup Nation. You may know that book well. It was a very well regarded book. But anyway, I had a kind of an epiphany at that point that led me to this concept of what I'm calling the 90-degree turn. So it was a great opportunity during the pandemic to focus on that, to sit down and write it out. And that's what I did. And I finished it earlier this year, and it'll be released on July 4 on Amazon, on Kindle and paperback.
Let's talk about what a great, and here, if as soon as I can get my actual screen to work. Here we go. Mm-hmm. Sorry about that, Fred. So let's talk about the actual 90-degree turn, because what we're discussing here is fundamentally a different way of funding the federal government, and you're doing so almost by, and I don't want to spoil the book, because folks, please go ahead and make sure you get your copy July 4th. But let's talk about this idea, and let's talk about, I forget the exact terms you use, but it's almost like a heat index of what the average sentiment on the specific issues that your average person is facing. You use Amazon as the example. If Amazon can do this and figure out what their customers want, why can't our government?
Yeah, well, let's face it. The founding fathers did brilliant work, but they didn't have the insights and the tools available to them that we have today. Thomas Jefferson made this point not long after the Constitution was signed, that it wasn't really addressing the future. So we have the tools today. And the idea here is simply It's very fundamental. It's like, let every American directly report their needs. And we aggregate those needs, whether that need is related to clean drinking water or education or, trash collection or any number of things. It could even be a broader national issue like defense, if you will. But they can articulate that in the needs monitor, and that's measured, it's tracked, it's aggregated, and then it's packaged and sent to the federal government for them to bid on. And the reason we do that is to identify because we have a massive bureaucracy in Washington. If you add in contractors, over 10 million people. And we have to bear in mind here, Brian, that we spend about $7 trillion a year out of Washington. That's 31% of the GDP. So calls for just summarily cutting out certain agencies and departments, I think, can be very destructive. So this approach is a filtering. It's what I call bottom-up separation, where we define the needs, aggregate the needs, are defined by every citizen. You don't have to participate. It's apolitical. We look at issues. You want clean water? Fine. What's the problem today? Do you have any solutions in mind? What have you? People write that down, and it gets aggregated, and then the government, Washington, bids on that, so to speak, and then we can identify what areas of the federal government have the resources that people want. So it has the second key benefit to the needs monitor is this, what I call bottom-up separation, where we actually filter out the resources, the assets of the federal government, and align them with local needs. So it won't be perfect. It's a philosophy. The site hasn't been developed yet, but it's an outlook for aligning. We do that in business, right? Always want to align with your market and your client. So here it's the federal government, really the massive bureaucracy they have there, and a lot of good resources, a lot of redundant resources, a lot of inefficiencies, but we begin to filter it out and find out what people really need, and making that association between local needs and federal resources, and then remanaging or repurposing the rest, the stuff that's not needed. So that's just one idea in the book. Not perfect. It's an outlook. It's a framework.
Right.
But I'm a big believer in iterating. You take an idea like this and you start working at it and you iterate. But one thing is clear today, and that is we have a big problem in Washington. The spending there is totally out of control. It's totally out of control. I did an analysis, and I think it's probably conservative at this stage, but imagine for every dollar spent by the federal government, we get less than half a penny of value. Okay? That was just, by the way, one metric in that calculation, or one example, I guess, case study would be the healthcare.gov. I mean, here's a website that cost at the time it launched with bugs over $600 million. And as someone in tech who built websites, 10 million would have been more than enough for that service. To date, the taxpayers probably paid close to $2 billion for that website. It has to be the most expensive in the universe, but we've done that. And I saw that in Washington. There's not a lot of consideration about getting a good return on investment. It's all about spending the money, and particularly on political matters like the Affordable Health Care Act, which it's fine. I'm not criticizing that, but it's the mechanisms, the way government goes about doing these things that are hugely inefficient. I call it the value gap in the book. And if you I say the value gap is around 99.5%. Now, if you look at, by comparison, if you were to look at, and I mentioned this in the book, referring to a study on an average Ford car, I think it was going back to 2018, and it cost Ford about $20,000 to build the car that they sold you for $22,000. So you're getting pretty good value. I think you're getting $20,000 of value on a $22,000 purchase. Now, of course, the prices have gone up a lot since 2018, but be that as it may, the argument holds. And here we have a value gap, if you do the math, of 9.1%. That's the profit that Ford gets. But you look at the government, 99.5% is the value gap. That's what it costs us to get a half a penny of value. And, so the thing in my view, and I think I outlined in the book, it's not really the deficit. I mean, the deficit is a concern for sure, but the bigger problem is the inefficiencies and reckless behavior and policies that result from just carefree spending. Iraq is an example of that. I mentioned misguided war, and that's what happens, I think, when you have too much to spend. You're anxious. Yeah.
To say the least, we see this especially over the past 2 years, where the federal government and the Fed have all of a sudden just ramped up the spending and the printing of money to meet that spending.
Right.
Exponentially. I think we just saw the most money printed over the past few years that we've seen in decades, if you were to combine it. So the fact that we're at that point right now as a nation, people are waking up to it, and not only to see that, it is an issue, but now they're feeling it, right? They go to the grocery store, they realize that they're not getting as much in the grocery store cart as they used to, but they also go to the gas station, and all of a sudden they're seeing the $5 plus for a gallon of gas on the big ticker, and it scares them. So let's give them a real tangible solution. And I think that's what you're trying to present here. And if you would, Fred, give us the outline. How does this go from being great idea in your book to actually putting this into action?
Well, a lot more is needed because right now it's just a blueprint, Brian. It's just an idea. It's a theory. And some don't even like me calling it a theory. So you can call it a concept or an outline. But I don't think it's that difficult. I mean, going forward, it wouldn't be, I don't think, so difficult, having been in tech and having a secure open source web platform that does what I've said in so many words, collects the needs in a sophisticated way, right? And a political way. There's no field for party affiliation. That's what kills us, by the way, I think, as Americans. We cannot have a dialogue about anything substantive because it always starts with a D or a P or something next to your name that, is an instant label that kills that. I want to go back, as I mentioned in the book, to, was it Isaac and, come now, let us reason together.
Yep.
Saith the Lord. Let us do that as, American citizens. Okay, I have a water issue. You have a water issue. What do you think the solution is, or whatever? That's a dialogue, and that can result in productive things. We see that in business all the time and normal interactions. What's what you have to do in government because parties just killing us.
Parties are killing us, and they continue. They continue the conflict, because once the conflict goes away, then they go away. So to your point, I would say one of the biggest hurdles you're going to face is those two parties to begin with, because they're not going to want to actually get the problem solved.
No, this is a direct threat to anybody in Congress, in my view. I mean, I said a lot about inefficiency, and I'm making many examples of that in the book, and bureaucracy, but I don't blame the civil service as much as I blame members of Congress. Okay, they're for their campaigns, taking donations, huge amounts of money. And we know how that works. You take that and you pay back the people that got you in office. I give reference in the book to a study done, I think it was in '73 by David Mayhew at Yale, where he recognized a diminishing number of diminishing turnover in Congress. And that's only gotten worse. We don't have competition there. If I'm a big pharma, I'm going to bet first on the winning horse, not on the up and coming prospect. And so money tends to go to the people in power. And those people, looking at the bottom line, I would say almost all of them are, doing a terrible job. I mean, when you have a strategic objective from the Treasury saying, back in 2013 about the payments for insurance, work, I guess it's unemployment insurance, excuse me. They're reporting to Congress that for 14 of the last 17 years, over 10% of that money has been lost, mostly to fraud. And for Congress to do nothing about that, to me, is just, you're finished, guys. And of course, we see it today. How much of the CARES money and the like has fallen, in that same category, has gone to fraudsters. Many of them outside America, by the way. It's not even our fraudsters. Benefits probably more like Russian and fraudsters. So to see that happening, I mean, it'd be like being on a ship, Brian, and they say, "Oh, everyone knows about the leak, but the captain won't admit it." As the ship is like. So we have a similar thing in Congress, and I just, it's unacceptable in my view, and it's, the arguments are there and the data.
Yes.
So
let's talk about really.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was more so going to ask because I think this sounds like a good next step for like a logical conclusion for how we can take from where we are to where we can go. Like what's the next possible future, right? And one of the things that I think we see, especially right now in the era of COVID, I think COVID really helped people reframe the way they approach issues, is that you want to have more of an autonomous locality, a state, your locality, your township, your village, your city, wherever it may be, because then you're not impacted by the very top of the food chain every single election by every single policy.
Sure.
And if you change the mechanism by which you're funding those policies, inevitably it should change the policies themselves. So let's talk about the means to actually get, I know we talked about the heat map, if you will, the means of figuring out what the average person wants, but how do we actually get it to moving to a means where you're actually having dollars follow these pain points from the state and localities, but also leveraging the federal government? And you mentioned the areas that it does have the budget, the areas that it can help where states haven't had the chance to maybe pick up the pieces budgetarily speaking. So talk to us and outline how that would look.
Yeah, well, please interrupt if I'm not answering your question, because it can be a bit tricky. But fundamentally, the way I see this, again, is at a local level, we're organizing requirements based on needs from everyday citizens. And then those are packaged into requests for proposals that go to Washington. So it's not Washington, which is typically the case, producing it and sending out for bid. It's the other way around. And the reason for that, again, is for filtering this bottom-up separation, for filtering out what's needed and what's not. You'll find when you do that, I'll be willing to bet a lot of redundancy. In my days in Washington, I saw a great deal of redundancy. Even with contractors doing the same work as their shadow, and this wasn't the kind of redundancy that you really need. Sometimes you do need it with particularly secure matters, and managing nuclear spent fuel and things like this. But no, this was just for the sake of spending money. That's what Washington's about. And the problem is that our politicians, and the real epicenter of the whole problem is, at least in my view, and as I describe in the book, fundraising centric politics. That's what kills it all. And that, in my view, the complexity and the size and the unwieldiness and the bulk of government are all camouflage. They're layering of sorts, and we would use that term in money laundering, but they're camouflaged to Congress. It's much easier for me to strike a deal with DOD on a contract for Grumman or whomever, in today's environment. Nobody needs to know about that. It's, slid in on some bill somewhere. And now, I've just paid my debt back for getting reelected and so on and so forth. So, I mean, when we see 2/3 of Congress, 2/3 taking donations from pharma, that was the last election. 2/3. This is not a Republican Democrat. almost everybody. I mean, that's a super majority, I think, isn't it? 2.6 billion, I think, invested by banks. So, this is the problem. And I understand it's a human problem. It's not Democrat, Republican, it's human problem. Money is a huge bias, or creates one. I like money. You like money. You pay people and you condition them. So I think what has to happen here, Brian, I'm not really answering your question, but I think what has to happen here is we do need to we still have a Congress. We still have elected officials. We need them to go, like, I don't know, maybe some future movements went and say, no, we're not going to do this like this any longer. We're going to become facilitators. So the idea with Congress is that they facilitate those local needs. They're part of it. They know that, I'm from Flint, Michigan. We got a lead problem. I'm going to work with my constituencies and Washington to find the best resources for them, right? Directly. The other thing Congress should do is simplify law. The Library of Congress doesn't even know how many laws we have. Okay.
That's terrifying.
It is. It's true. So this is part of the age. I say the age, complexity, size, and politics, fundraising-centric politics, is what kills all of those things. Collectively, they kill things, but the politics is the worst part of it. So same with tax code. 14%, Brian, of what we collect is for tax preparation. That's ridiculous. That's $1,100 per tax return per American per year. $1,100. Here in Europe, I mentioned I was in Europe earlier, they have a ready return that costs pennies for the taxpayer. It's prepared for them by the government. It's usually 1 or 2 pages. You accept, you go on, or you dispute. So this problem, the complexity of tax code, has been reported to Congress over and over again. They have hearings, they have meetings. It's just a charade. They're not doing a damn thing about it. And that's a huge cost to people. So in the book, I'm suggesting Congress, we still have a Congress. You've proven yourself completely incapable of managing money effectively. So we're going to take that away because you're to a point of really, you are being dangerous. So, the states, some of them are not more efficient, frankly, than the federal government, but they're smaller and the damage is localized, not national. So, and by the way, the alignment is about aligning with everybody. So if I'm from New York, I want to know what people are saying. I should be on top of those metrics and understanding what the issues are and who in Washington is addressing that. So it's a much clearer connection between needs and resources. And that, at the end of the day, Brian, brings value. And that's what I believe we ultimately need to do, is return value to government. I don't expect the same level of value that I would get in private industry, but maybe half as much value.
Please, something better. That's all we're asking, is a step in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Folks, obviously this is a great chance for us to re-examine the problems we see as it pertains to, yes, the Leviathan that is the federal government and the funding mechanisms that we have in place. The 90-degree turn, it definitely will be and could be a great chance to re-examine things. So if you want to go ahead and pick up your copy, July 4th, Independence Day, is where folks can go ahead, or when folks can go ahead and grab it. Fred, where can folks go ahead and grab it?
It's on Amazon. Just go to Amazon. The 90-degree turn. We'll have it in Kindle and paperback.
Perfect. So, Kindle and paperback. Okay.
Yeah. I leave my email at the end because I really like to hear from people, and to the, best extent possible, build on this. It would be cool, to your question, Brian, to actually go forward and prototype.
Yeah.
Something like the needs monitor. So maybe we can do something on that.
Absolutely. And what was the best way to contact? You said you had an email there. Where can folks reach out?
Well, yeah, they can reach me at the name we see here is jbfred.eberlein@gmail.com. jbfred.eberlein, and I put that in the book. And I don't have a website yet, but if it makes sense, we'll certainly build one in due course and iterate through this process. It's not perfect, but I think anything that can help streamline Washington will get us on a better course. And see, by the way, when you streamline in this way and you take the money out of Congress, it just puts a huge hole in fundraising centric politics. So all of a sudden, bankers and farmers and the like don't have the clear path they have today between money and rewards. So we disrupt that system. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. Maybe there comes a time, 50 years, where we have to go back to more of a central government. But we're 50 states, and we can be lean and decentralized. And that's what I'm advocating. So.
Well, there you go, folks. There's your call to action. Head to briannicholsshow.com where you can find today's episode. Plus, you will find all the links mentioned here in the episode. By the way, if folks, you'd like the shirt I'm wearing, it's hard to see, I know here. I'm going to make my screen big one time here. It's our Stop Trusting Government Bureaucrats. I thought it was topical for today's episode. Folks, you can head over to briannicholsshow.com/shop, and you can pick up your copy. I'll share right here on the screen for our YouTube watcher. Yes, you can go ahead and check out our shirts here over at Proud Libertarian. You can find this, plus we have a bunch of other great swag over there for folks. But make sure you use code TBNS at checkout, and you'll get, I think it's 5% off, 15%, I forget. Go ahead and use the code, and you'll find out. It's a surprise. How about that? But with that being said, Fred, any final thoughts here for the audience today?
Buy the book. Read it. Give me your feedback. Tell me what you like. Tell me what stinks or sucks. Or can I say that on there?
Of course you can.
But I am a believer in dialogue. And in the beginning of the book, I give a mention of my father, and he's no longer with us, but he was the one who taught me, which has proven to be a great thing in business and life, how to have a conversation.
Oh, man.
So
yeah.
Let's get America back to having a conversation about our local needs. Boy, we'd be so much better off if we can get away from all this crap that has caused so much division and hate.
Oh, man.
I want love and value.
Let's get there. Yeah.
Anyway.
The more we can get things focused on the issues that truly matter, and that is the issues that are impacting us in our surrounding environment every single day. I use the example back with the peak of the pandemic. I was pretty darn upset when I would look outside and see, when I was in Philadelphia, PA, that my garbage wasn't picked up for 6 weeks in a row. And as I watched the piles of garbage just grow and grow and grow, and that was due to my city government, not due to the federal government.
Sure.
And you see this, that's just one silly example of me being, peeved off because of dirty garbage outside. But this is
it's justified.
It is exactly. Well, yeah. And it's in so many different other areas too, Fred. And I think that's where folks are definitely waking up. So folks, if you have enjoyed today's episode, I'm going to ask you to do me two things. Number one, please go ahead and give the book, the copy of the book, purchase over at Amazon. It's available July 4th. Link in the show notes. And then number two, if you enjoyed today's episode, please go ahead and give it a share. And when you do, please go ahead and give yours truly a tag as well at B Nichols Liberty. And folks, with that being said, that's all we have for you today. By the way, did you check out yesterday's episode? If not, well, please make sure you head over there. I'm going to include it right here below, because I'm going to show you how you can get paid in crypto. That's right. If you have an employer, you can get them to pay you directly in crypto. Want to find out? Our good friend Paul Bradley from GetHedged.io joined us to discuss that. So again, I'll include that video right here below. And otherwise, if you're here on the audio version of the program, surprise, we have a YouTube. Make sure you head over to briannicholsshow.com where you can find today's episode, and you can also find the YouTube version of the program. Give it a subscribe and make sure you do that. Hit that little notification bell so you're not missing a single time we go live. But with that being said, it's Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Fred Eberlein, the 90-degree turn. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.